So I'm Philip Oliver.
And I'm Andrew Oliver.
And in the games industry, we're known as the Oliver Twins. There'll be a reason for that, obviously. Okay, so we've been making games for over 35 years. First published games at 83, age 15, obviously at school. Fifth year as they called it back then. We worked quite hard, and we'll talk more about this, but we actually ended up creating more 8-bit games than anybody else in the world. And we came to Leamington Spa, and over our time in Leamington Spa, we have employed over 600 people. At its height, it was 235. That's in about 2010 at Blitz. We've created, during that time being in Leamington, over 160 games. Those games have gone on to sell millions of copies, 45 million copies, excess retail value in excess of 1.2 billion. We've been awarded honorary doctorates from Coventry, which is very nice of them. And a couple of years ago, we sold our company to Rebellion, and we're now doing lots of university work, and we've both made visiting professors. And now we're consultants to the games industry because we've kind of got quite a lot of experience in it.
Okay, so where did that all start? Okay, so we were born in the late 60s in Liverpool at the height of the Beatles. So didn't know much about it, only just born. Just before man landed on the moon, so there was a sort of a vibe that everyone was looking to the future. What was the future? It was going to include computers because computers had just been invented. And here's a guy sitting at his computer, which takes the whole room, and probably had unbelievably small amount of memory and everything like that. TVs and wooden boxes and black and white, but there was aspirations of the future. I mean, they did have aspirations that cars would have self-driving and things. So that's quite cool. And there we go. That's us. We are mum and dad. So, grew up in the 70s.
You can remember this.
Can just about remember when we got a colour TV and suddenly things were very colourful because of the colour TV, and Star Wars arrived, and Star Trek, and this was because obviously there was this whole thing about moon landing. What will be next? We will be travelling the universe. Obviously, that's going to happen. And by the end of the 70s, you could actually buy a computer in a small box.
It did look like a till.
It does look like a till.
Okay, so but our kind of formative years, our teenage years, were in the 80s. And we put some kind of imagery up there for anybody who's in this kind of same.
This was the toys that made something to us
exactly
that inspired us.
So we got a Merlin, which is like a little tic-tac-toe, I think they call it. It's kind of noughts and crosses. In about 1980, our older brother got a ZX81 that's over here and put it on family TV in 81. That's the reason it's named. We discovered something very important from a ZX81, and that is you need a better computer. It had 1K of memory, a paper keyboard, black and white, low resolution, blocky graphics like teletext. I mean, teletext had colour. This didn't even have that. It was awful. But you did learn that you need a better computer. So these are the kind of things that we grew up with. Digital watch, I remember having one of those. Not the one with the silver strap. And this is a little Pong machine. In fact, this is our little Pong machine that we were bought. I think it was actually 79. But we used to play our little Pong quite a lot.
Okay, so we were fascinated by the arcade games that started appearing. So you go into pubs or the arcades were all pinball machines and fruit machines, slot machines. But suddenly these games were turning up that were on a TV. You were running them on the TV. So Space Invaders and Pac-Man were sort of the big ones. But we were just absolutely fascinated that you could control a TV because up to that point the TV was in your home, in your living room. You only had the one big one, well, it's fairly small actually, and it had BBC, ITV, and occasionally BBC Two. But it was transmitted and there was nothing you could do about it. But now, with things like the Pong machine, you could actually control the TV. And we were just fascinated, and we got quite addicted, sort of in the arcades, to sort of just putting 10p's in, wanting to play these games, and we're very competitive and beating each other, that we wanted to sort of get one of these home computers. So they're quite a lot of money. I mean, computers were expensive. They were sort of typically a couple of £100. Back in the 80s, that was more like...
You'd have to multiply that by about 3 to get up to today's value.
£600, £800 or something for what is pretty damn basic. Let's face it. But we could see the vision, and it would be able to do Pac-Man. So
we also had the imagination that it would be better than it was.
Oh yes, imagination was a big thing back then. Cost too much, so we did a paper round, and we just worked and worked and worked. Although our parents actually, we got round to Christmas, we hadn't made enough money, and they topped it up and bought the computer. Anyway, we just started doing what they called type-in listings back then, because computers would just come with a manual and just show you how to program. So it was line 10, print, hello world, line 20, go to 10, run, and it goes, hello, hello world, all the way down the screen. And you go, I'm controlling the TV. And you had made the computer do something. So there was a magic there. So we wrote a couple of little things, sent them to magazines. There was a thing where people were saying in schools that all these kids are fascinated by computers. We were generally fascinated by the games, to be fair. That it should be embraced and it should be into the schools. So schools should teach kids how to program, but the problem is it's not on the curriculum, it's not on the syllabus. So how would this be attracted? And the teachers, they don't know how to teach it because they didn't know it themselves. But there was an initiative by the BBC to make a TV programme on the sort of rarely used BBC Two that would teach you how to program. The problem is there were quite a lot of computers turning up. There was the Sinclair Spectrum, the Commodore 64, Dragon. Yeah, we had the Dragon.
Dragon.
Yeah, various different computers. So what they decided to do, which was very smart, was they went to all the companies and said, we want to brand one as the BBC computer, which we will buy a lot of and put them into all the schools, and all the avid ones can buy them for home as well. And so the BBC Micro came about. They commissioned a small company called Acorn Computers, which then turned into Acorn Risk Machines, which has just been shortened to ARM. So it's in every single one of your phones. So it started with the BBC Micro.
Actually, it started before that with the Atom.
Yes.
You weren't going to that.
Okay, so we were at school. We entered a competition because now it was popular and being pushed by the BBC and pushed in the schools. TV programmes said we'll do a national competition for design a game, and we decided to enter it, and we won first prize, which really turned us into the geeks at school when we turned up after, because it was live TV. So on the Monday, everyone going, we saw you on TV, you're real geeks. Right, okay, and to prove that we're real geeks, and lastly, when we left school, it was a case of there were no actual courses on like how to make games or anything like that.
Not even graphics at university.
No, our dad wanted
all we wanted to do.
Go to university and to learn about computers, but they were generally Cisco systems, IBM.
Cobalt, Fortran.
Yeah, and they were weird languages.
How to sort databases.
And it's like, well, we wanted to program for these microcomputers and graphics.
We wanted to make games.
And yeah. So, just to prove that we are geeks, we got a small clip of us on TV. 83.
Competition. A few weeks ago we asked you to design a game and send it in either as a drawing or else as a cassette. Just remind us what sort of special things you were looking for before you
National TV.
It was looking for obviously the game concept.
Right, let's meet these guys, shall we? Can we have a nice welcome, please, for our computer competition winners, Philip and Andrew Oliver from Trowbridge in Wiltshire. Where are they?
There's a few little cuts where we kind of show.
Which is which? I'm Andrew. I'm Philip. Andrew and Philip. All right. But the thing we ought to do really is take a look at your game in action. Okay.
So let's start a game now.
Right, the arrows in the top corner indicate the player. So I'll move the wall first. The wall appears.
Nice anyway, and I know that everybody will be green with envy. They got a nice computer of their own at home, so we said, why don't you choose another prize?
Can't say BBC.
And you decided to go for what's called a high-resolution monitor, whatever that is, you didn't say. So you not know. So once again, congratulations to the winners of our computer competition, the Olivers!
Interestingly enough, that prize, we would never have afforded to have a monitor, but actually we needed a monitor, and actually it was really useful having a monitor. The reason being is that these computers are all plugged in with an aerial signal into the back of the TV, and you're trying to type code, and you get a really blurred picture, so it's really hard to type code. It's really hard, it's even harder to do graphics, but because they'd given us this monitor as the prize, we could actually link our computer with a composite input and actually have clear pixels. That monitor was, in today's money, like £1,000. School kids are not going to buy that. So actually, that gave it quite a
They called that high resolution monitor. It was better than a portable TV.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have called it
the
high
bar
resolution.
was set very low. You can do 320 wide pixels by 240. Okay, anyway, so we started programming in BASIC, so that you break open the computer, it's got a manual, you've got some type-in listings in magazines, and it's all basic language, like the print and go to and all this kind of stuff. But we actually discovered that that's actually quite a slow language to program in, and we wanted to create games like Pac-Man and stuff. So we ended up having to learn assembler, and you've got a few little props down here. Trying to actually find books this way.
Oh, the book.
Yeah, trying to actually find books back before Amazon and back before people would send this stuff to you. It's way too specialist for anybody to actually be, so I was going to say publishing these things, but for you to actually be able to go to a local bookshop and actually find anything.
This describes how the main chip worked.
Yeah, so this
Instructions.
this was one of the books we learned from, and the BBC manual actually did have a little bit of assembly. So that was very, very useful. Anyway, we during our sixth form, we just had the type-in listing printed and published. We managed to get the game that we went on the TV show with published by Acorn Soft on BBC, but then we kind of discovered that really we wanted to put graphics into our games. And back then, this was before art packages, before sort of
Paint shop
and stuff like that. So we actually ended up thinking, well, we want to put graphics onto the screen, but we can't. So we did the whole graph paper thing.
Yeah, you can.
Where you actually,
it's in our book. But people used to just draw things out onto graph paper and then work out what the numbers would be for the bit pattern, the binary.
Hex code in and all this kind of. Anyway, so we did that, and that was really boring and really slow. So we actually did an art package to begin with, and we actually sold the art package for other people to do art. But then we quickly discovered that actually we wanted to do little sprites and animations, so we can have little running men or Pac-Mans that do that. So we actually went on and created another package, Andrew, which is Panda Sprites, which basically we'd learned assembler by this time. We created like a little art package to create all these little animations, but we actually also included all the code so that you can actually, other hobby programmers who only knew BASIC could actually benefit from the speed of assembler. And we actually put all that code in there. So it's kind of like an early middleware, an early Unity. Yeah. And it actually worked, and it was really, really fast. So during the upper sixth, that was the lower sixth, during the upper sixth, we actually started cranking out lots of games. Unfortunately, nobody really paid us for it. It was quite nice to walk into shops and actually see them in the shops, but in the background, we were getting paid £200, £300, but the computers were really expensive, and doing all the kind of hassles and negotiations and visiting people, that was really expensive. So we weren't really making any money. Our parents sort of said to us, you can take this gap year, and our dad made the throwaway comment, and if you earn more than me in the first year, you don't have to go to university. Well, bear in mind we didn't want to go to university, that sounded like a winner. So we had to then focus on the business side of things and think, okay, what's actually going to earn some decent money? So we looked at the market, and the number one game at the time was Ghostbusters. And because of the movie, but there was a game, Ghostbusters, from Activision. You may have heard of them. They did quite well off the back of that game. And it was a number one game. So we thought, well, we need a license. We need something where people walk into a shop and go, I know that, I like that, I want that. But we can't afford licenses. We can't go to Hollywood and buy these lights, right? So we came up with the idea that, well, Disney doesn't do this when it does Snow White and Cinderella and all this. So are there any of those that would actually make appealing games? And we came up with Robin Hood. So we went along to pitch at a trade show and walk around all the different stands. Does anybody want this game? We've published games in the past, we can write games, there isn't a problem, but would anybody like to pay us to make this game? And it was only one sheet of A4 handwritten, but the idea was Super Robin Hood. Super because it's better than just a regular Robin Hood.
And there was Superman and there were superheroes.
Exactly. This is before Super Mario, by the way. I think he got the idea from somewhere. He didn't. Anyway, so we met the Darlings at that show. So this is September '86. It's in Hammersmith at ECTS. They had a little stand, just a single table, a couple of banner stands, posters on the wall. And we showed them all the kind of games we've been releasing, and there's a few there. And we said, we've got this new game, and we'd like to write this, and would you like to be the publisher? And in which case, how much would you pay us? And it was David Darling we were talking to, and David Darling sort of looked at it again. I think I could pay you £10,000 for that. That's like £30,000. I'm thinking, this is easy. It's like, we could do this in a month. So we're like, brilliant, right, fantastic. And we basically stopped meeting all the other publishers there quickly. By the way, this is the first time they'd actually been public, and they were just setting up. So this was the first time they'd ever sort of met the public as Codemasters. So we quickly went home and we just thought we have to make this game as quickly as possible and get it back to them before they change their minds. So we had one computer, it was an Amstrad CPC 664, and we basically took shifts, sort of 8 hours on and then a bit of sleep and then 8 hours on, but with enough time to kind of cross over. And also little downtime so the computer could actually not overheat. So we give the computer time to not overheat. Because if that thing blew up, we were in trouble.
Well, what happened
It was a 400 quid computer.
Yeah. So computers in the old days, they get hotter and hotter as your phones do in your pocket, but they just start getting crashy. And you think it's the code
that
you're writing, but you realise actually if you touch it, you burn yourself.
Anyway,
so the reason it's crashing is because it's just too damn hot.
The good news was we finished it in a month. We took it back to Codemasters, turned up with it, and said, "There's our game." They loaded it up, they had a play, and they go, "Oh, actually, this is really nice. That's brilliant." Brought out a contract, a single page, doesn't talk about IP. That's another story. Another story. Anyway. And basically, we said, "Well, that's brilliant and everything." Where's that check for £10,000? Oh, no, that was an estimate of predicted sales. I'm like, oh, that's hugely disappointing. We will pay you 10 pence a copy that we sell. We're like, that really doesn't sound too good. And actually, we kind of heard those kind of promises before. But they said, "Look, I'll tell you what, I'll sweeten the deal. I'll make a check out right now, here and now, sign it for £2,000. And this is just an advance on sales. And if the game does sell really well, then you'll get more." And we're like, "Ooh, bit of a dilemma." But on the other hand, we were getting paid $250 for the previous ones. 2,000 is still a pretty good number. So a bit.
And we've kind of done the work then.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's 1 month's work, so it's like, well, that's not bad.
It's not bad for school kids. So we were like, okay, we'll take that. Because that's effectively 3 times £6,000 for a month's work. School kids, it's not bad. So we took it. The good news was it went straight to number 1. They had it in the shops in within a couple of weeks. It went straight to number 1. Codemasters sort of lit up and everything. And we just thought, and it did earn more money than that. We felt that we just had to do that again. And again and again. So we did.
We were setting ourselves a goal of trying to write a game a month. And I mean, you've only got 32k of memory. How much can you fit in it? You kind of run out of memory quite quickly. But if we can raid a castle with soldiers and guards and bow and arrow, then we can raid haunted mansions that have ghosts and you've got plasma guns. We were getting a bit closer to our favourite film at the time. Ultimately, we did actually write the official game for Ghostbusters. It did actually come round, even though we'd sort of copied. But then we were thinking, we've got to write games that people would know and recognise, hence the Robin Hood thing. Aspirational. And so we were thinking, well, actually, people love car racing games and Formula One and Formula One. But that's a licensed IP, but the word Grand Prix isn't. So we thought, well, Grand Prix Simulator. We'll simulate the Grand Prix without any rights.
Codemasters, the Darling brothers, had just written, it was Richard Darling, had just written BMX Simulator, which was doing really well. And we were thinking, I think kids would like racing cars more than they would like bikes.
Yeah. So that's Codemasters' first racing game that we wrote, and that was phenomenally successful too. We went on to create. Not really. They're probably more like 6 weeks and 8 weeks. Some of these.
We did one in 3 days.
Yeah, we did.
Fast food, and it sold over.
It's not actually there.
Copies. It's there. It's standing out behind you. The game.
Oh, the game is here. Okay, we wrote a lot more games than we can fit on.
That one took 3 days.
That was a game jam. That was like the very first game jam. We were in a pub on a Friday evening and said we reckon we could write a game in even a few days if we don't sleep. See how well we can do. It was coming up to Christmas and we just finished a big one which had taken us about 2 months. But we realised we had like a window of opportunity. If we can get one more game out before Christmas, we could probably get it into the charts because we had a bit of a following at the time. So bit of a game jam. Anyway, so not only did we write a lot of games and more games than we could fit on the slides, we did a couple of novel things, and that was you had lots of different computers, and we'd had a package that would enable us to make games easier than anyone else and faster than anyone else. But people might have had, like we wrote on an Amstrad, but they had a Spectrum, or someone goes, I've got a Commodore 64. So what we did is we made some tools to make sure that we could get our games from one computer to the other. So our games went and hit all of the different platforms, which was pretty unique back then. I mean, nowadays, you write an app and it goes on Apple and Android. We know that. But back then, you write it for a Commodore 64, and that's it. So we sort of made some tools to make sure our games went across all. And that made them sell so much better because suddenly your audience was 3 or 4 times the size. But then we did another thing, and that is we went on holiday to Spain and we saw a few games in Spain because at that point, it was becoming a bit of a thing in the UK, with all the hobbyists and the kids and the teenagers all starting to get these home computers. But as soon as you go to places like France and Spain, they don't speak English. And we saw Pac-Man and Space Invaders, but there weren't really games as such. But the reason is they speak a different language. And we'd just written Dizzy, which is an adventure game, and you have to have all the descriptions and the little speech bubble dialogue boxes. And we thought, well, we can never sell our games into Europe unless we translate them. So we were some of the first people, I think it was about the first, that put all of our games into French, German, Spanish, and Italian, which again massively
Got to speed it
the
up.
market.
We do have a nice little prop though from our '87 game, one of the Dizzy games.
Oh,
Nice little prop.
we turned up on a stamp. So that was our original game. Is a Royal Mail stamp.
There's a bigger version of the stamp in that box.
Oh, for those of you with eyesight a little bit like mine, because my eyes are going a bit, right, there's a big version of the stamp that is out at the moment. So anyway, so
we were talking about roots and everything, kind of what made us actually do this. I mean, to be honest, there was a lot of schoolwork. There was other stuff around, and there were friends, although geeky friends.
no, they all went to university.
Well, actually,
we lost all of our friends. They all disappeared.
By the time we finished sixth form, they did all bugger off, which actually gave us a lot of time to program. But we did have to work extremely long hours for the first few years, kind of earning nothing. It was just a challenge. But it was, at first, it was the curiosity, like, can we make a fun game? We've sort of seen the Space Invaders and the Pac-Mans. Can we actually do this? Now that I've got a computer, at first on ZX81, no, we can't. Moving up to a Dragon 32, yes, we kind of think we can. We kind of discovered it was pretty slow, but so it was it was curiosity at first. Then it turned into a personal challenge to actually sort of try and impress each other, working competitively and collaboratively. But then it was to sort of try and show off our skills to friends and family. But once we've kind of done that, and they go, oh, actually, that's not bad. You then think, right, okay, what's the next target? The next target was to get published. We did that first as a type-in listing. Then, out of left field, we won a TV competition, which was like, whoa, this is brilliant. And that was a very lucky break. But then it was like, okay, we've done that, but can we now make better games? And can we get them published? And can we get them into the shops? And then obviously it was, okay, our games are now in the shops, but they're never in #1 slot. Well, until we go and move them, obviously. We always did. Turns out that everybody does that. Anyway, so our games were always in the #1 slot after we'd finished. But anyway, we want to get true bestsellers. So they were already in that slot before we walked in the shop. And once we'd actually done that, it was just a case of, okay, we just want to kind of keep doing that and making better games. And then it turned into, oh, actually, we need to earn some money. And I guess the sort of challenge that we had from our father was you've got to earn enough to not...
It was a good hobby, but we had to turn it into a business.
We had to turn it into a business, which we did very successfully. In fact, we bought a 4-bedroom house and moved out about the same time of that year being up. And actually, that was in Trowbridge. It wasn't even here. So a year later, we had to move up to Leamington because that's where our publisher was, Codemasters, as you all know, in Southam. But actually, they all live in Leamington. And then obviously, we like the fact
so this is
being written about and talked about.
Whilst we used to go in the shops and move the games around on stuff, but this was the official printed chart that we found a photograph of, and we highlighted with a marker pen all the games that were ours. So you can see in the top 10, I think we had about 5 in the top 10. Don't worry about the top 20, but there's nothing in there.
No, none of ours.
You just focus on the top 10, right? Which we had a half of. At one point, we were 15. Our games accounted for 15% of the UK games.
All games sold in the UK. Keep going.
So
what happened? Where did that lead? This is the last slide. I'm aware we're slightly running over, but actually that led us to moving to Leamington and setting up a games company. So we set up Blitz Games and Andrew.
It's not all of the games.
They wouldn't actually all fit.
But we'd gone from that success we had at Codemasters and started to employ people. We backed this new computer called the PlayStation, which people said would never work, but we thought it was very cool. And not only did we back it, a lot of developers didn't back it, which kind of helped us because it gave us a gap in the market. But then the film companies started backing it. So Disney, DreamWorks, Fox, Universal, MGM. We worked for them all. We made games of their films.
Or TV series.
The toy companies were suffering, so Action Man and Barbie and stuff were starting to sell less because all the kids wanted computer games. So we made games of Barbie, Bratz, and Action Man. We've got Action Man games, not even here, but we made a set of Action Man games.
Couldn't fit 160 boxes on the screen.
Yeah, we made a lot of games, and again, we made sure they were all in different languages. I think
all on different platforms.
Yeah, I think Lilo and Stitch is in 14 different languages with all voices. So I think the voice budget was actually higher than the game budget because it's all the people from the films in all the different localized territories, which is kind of funny. But we made sure that they were always on the PlayStation, the Xbox, and the Nintendo platforms at that time.
Right, let's try and wrap it up because I'm aware that this is quite a quick session. So we will have some time for some questions. You've probably spotted a couple of times that book. This was actually produced a few years ago. We do not make any money from this. We give all the money to charity. And if anybody wants to know all of that story in a lot more detail,
it's in the book.
Then it's in the book. And if you want to buy some, we've actually bought some along, and all the money goes to charity. They're £20 each, and we give the money straight to charity. So
it's also on Amazon, which you might have heard of.
But do we have some time for any questions?
Well, one last point, and that is that this is just the start of it. There was a talk later in the Spa Centre where we continue to talk about this, and tomorrow morning I'm doing the history of the games development scene in Leamington Spa.
Talking about all the other games companies that are here and where they come up,
and why this is like one of the biggest hotbeds in the world for making video games. So Leamington Spa is to the games industry what Pinewood is to the film industry.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you.